Okay, hi, folks. I just saw a very interesting podcast. I'll tell you about it in a minute. Anyhow, the guest was Andrew Bustamante, and he has a consulting agency now that helps people with their businesses and whatever. He's an ex CIA field operative, agent, spy, whatever you call it. And it's kind of fun. He has a website called Everyday Spy. You can check that out, everydayspy.com. I'll put the information in the description of this video. But it's kind of fun to hear from a CIA person who's moved on and has some things to share about their world. We all know we've gone through ice ages and survived that, so we go through this hot period and see how we're going to do under those circumstances. And that might require that we change the way we do things. It might force us to become creative, kind of creative destruction via natural disaster that was man-made. Think of it. So anyhow, it's interesting to see where the guy's coming from. So I'm going to read through some of this. Yeah, hello again. So anyway, I was watching the Impact Theory podcast with Tom Bilyeu. The guest was Andrew Bustamante, and he used to be a CIA field operative, spy, whatever you call him. And it's just kind of fun to get perspective from somebody who's been in that field and has left and then started a business, a consulting business to help people with their businesses and their life using things he learned in the CIA. You know, you may love or hate the CIA. Maybe there is a kind of a deep state, you know, in terms of secrets, and they're doing things that the public doesn't know anything about, and we have to trust that they have our interests at heart. You know, I don't believe in any of that stuff and I think some of the because will be seen in my notes to this podcast. But anyway, you know, the primary thing, whether you're mercantilist or global neoliberal capitalist or whatever, socialist with Chinese characteristics, your objective is, you know, power, control, and generally that goes to the elites, whether you're in a monarchy or some form of democracy or other situation, autocracy or dictatorship. So anyway, we need to know about power, and I want to talk more about power and what that entails. One of the institutions that maintains power, obviously, is the CIA. So I was looking at ChatGPT and Google and whatnot. So for those of you who want a normal definition of the CIA, so here we go. The Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, is a civilian intelligence agency of the United States federal government. Its primary purpose is to collect, analyze, and disseminate intelligence information to support national security objectives. The CIA provides intelligence on foreign governments, non-state actors, and other entities that may threaten the United States or its interests. So now we can, this me talking, we can, you know, decide what the interests of the United States are and who they're for. And that might get murkier and more nuanced the more you delve into that, regardless of your ideological stance. CIA makes intelligence product for the U.S. government. I've read a few books on the CIA, and we've all seen a bunch of movies with CIA characters. So I'll continue with the ChatGDP version of what the CIA is. The CIA also carries out covert operations to advance U.S. foreign policy objectives. This includes activities such as espionage, sabotage, and paramilitary operations. The agency is authorized to carry out these activities by the President of the United States, with oversight from Congress and the courts. Oversight's another issue. This is me talking how much oversight, real oversight, so on and so forth. Also, the espionage and the sabotage and paramilitary operations and all that. What's it for? So I contend that it's for control of resources. There's a scarcity component there, and for America to be number one, we need to control resources and so on. It really doesn't have anything to do with me or you. It has to do with the state and its power. And you'll hear what the CIA guy said about that in a minute. Continuing. In addition to its intelligence and covert operations roles, the CIA also researches and develops new intelligence technologies and techniques. The agency also supports other U.S. government agencies and departments, including law enforcement and military organizations. So it's interesting in the light of the artificial intelligence revolution, or development, what government agencies are going to do to maintain and control information. The information that we see, Matt Taibbi's done a lot of work on that. A lot of people are talking about that now, about the press and censorship and whatnot. But also, can you imagine how artificial intelligence is going to enhance the capability for governmental control of information that we consume? And of course, we're all programmed by our experience and what we pay attention to and information. And so this is going to have a big impact on who we think we are. And, some people are going to not like it very much, libertarian groups and so on, and they're going to try to push back. But how much power do we really have? So moving on with my notes, the CIA works to maintain the power of the state, full stop. Andrew Bustamante, I guess I'll just call him Mr. Bustamante from now on. He wanted to make sure that his host and the audience understood that it exists to maintain state power. So, and he was part of the Human Intelligence Operation group. So these people go out in the field and find targets that may have access to secrets, and they create a dossier on these people, the target person, and then they figure out a way to get into that person's life so that they can find out the secrets. Moving on to ChatGDP, explanation of human intelligence operations. It's called human intelligence. Operations are critical to the Central Intelligence Agency's intelligence gathering activities. Human involves collecting information through human sources such as agents, informants, and defectors. Human operations are conducted by trained CIA officers who work undercover in foreign countries to recruit and handle agents who can provide valuable intelligence information. These agents may be foreign government officials, military personnel, or members of non-state organizations such as terrorist groups or criminal organizations. They could just be also, I guess, people just working in an office somewhere where they have access to secrets. Continuing with ChatGDP's version of this, human operations involve a variety of techniques, including elicitation, recruitment, debriefing, and liaison. Elicitation involves gathering information from individuals who may not be aware that they are providing intelligence. Recruitment involves identifying potential agents and convincing them to work for the CIA. Debriefing involves extracting information from individuals who have already provided intelligence. Liaison involves working with foreign intelligence services to share information and coordinate activities. Human operations are critical to the CIA's effort to understand and respond to threats to the U.S. national security. They provide the agency with valuable insights into the intentions and capabilities of foreign governments and non-state actors, allowing the U.S. government to develop effective policies and strategies to protect American interests. So what are American interests? I would say that any thoughtful person would want to ask a lot of questions about that. What are American interests? What interests does the United States actually serve? So when you vote once every 4 years, and you call that participating in democracy, what are you actually voting for? Who gets the benefits of all of these amazing efforts by the CIA and the United States government? Your representatives in Congress and the Senate? I digress. So there's 3 developmental stages of human mind, according to Mr. Bustamante. And this is based on science that CIA has been using for their deck of operational ideas. So number 1, from birth to 7 years old, we're sponges that believe everything. Everything is true. 2, from 7 to 13, we can distinguish true and untrue, but you choose what to give value to, what to upregulate or believe. You prefer one set of information over another and still absorb all information. So now you have preferences. I'm going to believe this, I'm not going to believe that kind of thing, but you're still more or less of a sponge. From 13 to 25 years old, and we're talking brain development here, and generally that we believe that the brain continues to develop very dynamically until around 25 years old. So imagine that, our species, how long it takes us to form our image of self and all that kind of thing. Robert Sapolsky is a good resource for this kind of stuff. Anyway, by the time we get to 13 to 25, we're more resistant of some forms of information. We have more stringent preferences, and we reject information. So I might be a Catholic or a Muslim and so on and so forth, and by now I've developed to a point where I reject information that's contrary to strong beliefs that I've developed. So we can block what we don't like. In other words, we can cast it out of our attention. Say, I'm not going to look at that. And you find that in people. We're stubbornly ignorant of things we don't want to know about. We hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil. We don't want to question certain things because it might interfere with our faith and our beliefs and so on. So the dossier that the CIA people are developing focuses on the first 25 years of the life of the target of the CIA operative. So they're looking. So you can watch the thing and he'll tell you about it. These are just when I'm thinking about what he said. So it's important for all of us, I think, to think critically about how society and circumstances have programmed us, have given us our sense of self and identity and whatnot. Where did that all come from? It's just not inherently in us the day we're conceived or the day we're born or when we're children. It develops over time. So the nature-nurture thing is incredibly important, and how we're programmed by our experiences, circumstances, society, health or ill health, and so on, is very, very impactful on who we become and what we think we are and what our capabilities are, what our potentiality for the acquisition of certain skills and so on. It's complex, people. So if you're taking your thing for granted, I think you're not much of a critical thinker. So anyway, how much information have you been exposed to? All that kind of thing, where the information comes from, your culture. You know, if you were born a Japanese person or a Chinese person, how would you think? And all of this develops in the first 25 years of your life. So by then, 25 years old, you should have a worldview, right? And somehow you need to give yourself permission to change your worldview, or you have to be curious enough or have some other thing stimulate you to want to change your worldview, or at least look into other worldviews, have an open mind. So Christopher Hitchens, for example, he often debated with religious apologists, but he knew the Bible well, and he often said that you can't read Shakespeare and understand Shakespeare without knowing your Bible. This is a fact. So a lot of people just, don't want to know anything about religion, but they forget where our current culture came from over hundreds and hundreds of years. You just don't throw it away. It permeates everything. So in that sense, Jordan Peterson has an interesting insight when he says you're a Christian even if you don't know it. I don't agree with the total spirit of that statement, but I know where he's coming from. So the CIA guy will go in there and try to figure out what the worldview of this person is based on that dossier, looking at their life from 0 to 25. And they come up with probabilistic generalizations about this person, who they are, what they think, how they behave, how they may react to certain situations, and so on. It's a big deal. It's a big process from what I understand from reading and from what this Mr. Bustamante was saying. So also there's different personas. So when you're meeting somebody the first time, and this is true, we all have our autobiographical performance piece it's a set piece that we use when we meet people or when we're in public. We want to show people that I'm a quality man with lots of things going, potential to get rich, powerful, influential, smart, whatever qualities you think you want to project to the world based on what you think you need and want to achieve and get. You're going to have this. Think of the way you behave when you first meet a girl or a guy that you like, and then what happens 3 months later. So the public performance is important. So the public person is a persona. And then you have a private person. So when you get to know somebody better, you get into their private life a little more. And you're also hanging out in quote unquote private. So you're with a friend and you have more trust, you're more open, you're doing more private things together, and so on. But then the other type is the secret person. So we all have our secrets, right? And they could be all benign or banal secrets. They could be very traumatic secrets. They could be, I don't want you to know I'm a Satanist type thing. That's my secret. I don't know. Something like that. And then you'll get into the CIA folks will get into their personality type. So then he talked about this personality types that they have in the CIA. So he was talking about lions are organizers, foxes are creators, idea people, cheetahs take action, and bears build relationships, whatever that's worth. The Myers-Briggs thing is a thing. Even though they know that when you take it at different times, it can have different results. It's still a useful tool, they say. Also, you have time, energy, and money. That's what your primary resources are in life. And those are limited resources in a sense. You know, like I don't have the energy for that right now. I don't have the time for that right now. I don't have the money for that right now. So where are you going to focus your time, energy, and money? And, you know, how are these resources? How are you using these resources moment to moment? Are you strategic in your use of time, energy, and money? Do you have some strategies, some goals behind them? Do you have a tactical sense of it? You know, are you organized? So on and so forth. But anyway, you need all these kinds of different personality types. Cheetahs, idea people, action people, relationship people. So CIA teams are generally, he said, 4 people out in the field, and they try to mix the personality types so you have an ideal team, a high performance team. So you don't just have all cheetahs that are action people or all bears that are relationships people. You have a mix of foxes and cheetahs and bears and lions, you know, organizational types. Then he talked a bit about opening questions and how you establish relationships, and they have an interesting term for it called a bump. So you're just bumping into somebody. It's like a random event by accident. Oh, just bumped into you. How are you today? What's up? And of course, they've rehearsed all of this from the dossier, you know, how to approach the person. Is the person shy? Is the person outgoing? And so on. How do I approach them? They analyze this, they script it, they rehearse it, and they try to have a successful connection after the bump. So it's important to know the personality of the person that you're targeting, right? Most of us, when we bump into somebody, we have no idea. And the chemistry of that person will either repel us or attract us, and vice versa. So you just kind of organically figure out if you're going to connect or not. And if you do, you keep talking. If you don't, you move on. Salesmen are good at this. You know, you're selling international expatriate medical insurance, so you're going to talk to everybody because you want to get them in a conversation so that you can just mention that you're a medical insurance guy and then see if they need medical insurance. Salespeople use this kind of stuff all the time. It's good to be a good salesman, I guess, if you're going to be a CIA operative in the field. He also mentioned, which I think is so true, that we all have 1,000 faces, 1,000 different personalities, micro-personalities. We're all kind of schizophrenic in a sense, not in a pathological sense, but we have aspects to our character that we don't share that much, but they come out from time to time. The angry person, the impatient person, the childish person, the 8-year-old you, the risk-taking 16-year-old you. You know, you have all these different personalities and they come out. And it's temporary when the mad you, like for me, when I get angry, it's a very short period of time, you know, very quick. It subsides and dissipates. But a person who knows me would have to be able to tolerate that. Oh, Stephen's mad. He won't be mad in a minute, so I'll just step aside and let him get over it, type thing. So we grow to tolerate our friends and significant others' various personality types. So he mentioned, I forget who it was, whether it was the host or the guest mentioned that, you know, they recognize this in their spouse, and they might say something like, I see that I'm talking to the 8-year-old Andrew right now. When you're ready, I'd like to talk to the current Andrew, the mature Andrew, if you don't mind. And somehow that's okay with them because they use this as a means of having a better relationship. It's a tool, I guess. So again, you have to understand the difference in culture. So cross-cultural awareness is important. So the Western mind is more interested in achievement. So you brag about your successes, your war stories, your money, your possessions, your awards, and so on. And Korea is different, Japan's different, Russians are different. You really have to look into that. I read a book about emotions and how important they are to culture. I've talked about that before. It's not on the top of my head right now. But it's very interesting to see how people emotionally process things and react to things across cultures. So there's a lot of things in your culture that contribute to who you are. And if you're a field agent in the CIA, you need to understand the culture in which you're working, obviously. If you're in Jordan versus Beijing versus Sudan, type of thing, obviously you have to know where you're at. Even subtle differences like Belgium and France, or Austria and Germany, right? Or the Deep South and Boston, San Francisco. There's different cultures in the United States. And if you're going to successfully operate in a different culture, you have to know how to do that. For me, I've lived in 7 countries, and I'm interested in culture and cultural anthropology and stuff. So I always delve into it. I find it fascinating, and it's really exciting when I do. So I don't mind that. And I respect cultures, and I recognize that I'm coming from a certain place, and other people are different. Some people are defensive, you say, suggest your opinion or your perspective on life, and they're saying, yeah, well, I'm different. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you are different. That's fine. I was just, sharing my perspective is all. Anyhow, that's a different thing. So he mentioned that, in all things in life, we fail a lot, and we have to be comfortable with failure, and we have to focus on what keeps us in the game, what keeps us swinging. So what is it about this activity that's so compelling that you'll continue doing it even if you fail? And there are different incentives and motivations there, even in terms of a failed business. You went bankrupt a couple of times, you failed at business a few times, and then suddenly you made $1 billion. So Tom Billio, he likes to talk about how successful he is and how he sold many businesses, one for $1 billion, and high net worth individual. But still, he runs a podcast that advertises heavily, and he runs a business, a consulting business that charges a lot of money. So he's still a money motivated guy. Just because he has all the money in the world, he's not going to give his podcast away or his consulting business away. So Ray Dalio has a service business, hedge fund, and so on, and he writes books and sells books. But of course, he gives a lot of that to charity. He may write a book and give all the proceeds to charity because he's already a high net worth guy. I don't know about Tom, whether he does that, but it's obviously very important for him to say in each podcast that he's a winner, that he was a loser and now he's a winner and he's been successful and blah, blah, blah. Because that's a selling point for him. Now, I'm different. So I would probably just give away my information because, I'm super rich. Just want to help out. But different strokes for different folks. So that's an interesting aside on Tom. He's a good podcaster and he has interesting guests, and I recommend his podcast, but it's not one of my favorites. So another big thing in the CIA interview, Bustamante said that moral flexibility is an important personality trait for people in covert ops. And yeah, I would guess so. You have to be willing to use people, willing to see things in various ways, willing to be flexible in your worldview and so on to fit in. So yeah, that makes sense. He also said that CIA mission is, the primary mission of the CIA is American primacy, period. And why wouldn't you as an American want America to be number one. USA, 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 USA. So regardless of what happens, you may be poor, have no insurance, uneducated, and so on and so forth. But it's all good because America's number one and I'm an American. I hate the libs. You know, I'm scared of all the fascist conservatives and so on and so forth. You know, I'm a woke maniac and justice warrior, whatever, you know, all these subsets, but I'm an American. America's number one. So even if I hate most Americans who aren't like me, I'm really, really happy that we're number one. And when the Olympics come around, I want us to win all the gold medals. I'm not rooting for specific athletes from different countries. I don't even watch cross-country skiing because America never wins a gold medal in cross-country. Anyway, you know what I'm talking about. So any kind of collateral damage or negative externalities or whatever that the CIA might get the world into is not of concern, really. I mean, they try to run clean operations, I'm sure, because they're professionals. But, you know, if people out there get hurt, it doesn't matter as long as the work and the work product contributed to American primacy, American power. You know, that's the ticket. And of course, all countries spy on each other. So he mentioned that the CIA hate the French because they're constantly getting over on the US intelligence services, because the French don't like the USA because they hold grudges, and they found out that the USA was spying on them and they didn't like that, so they upped their game. So all countries, even allies, spy on each other. Remember, we got caught spying on Angela Merkel and so on. That happens all the time. People spy because all countries want power. And why do they want power? Why? For example, does the French state want power for slightly different reasons than the American state or the Chinese state? What are they working for? What are their ideological, goals and so on? How do they think? So if you study Chinese governmental system, you're going to find out they have different reasons, and they're good reasons. You might not like them or know about them, but they're good reasons. And Russia has their reasons and so on. So everybody spies, everyone wants primacy. And of course, there are, as I maintain, players across the globe in every country. These people generally have more power, more control, more resources. And of course, they're going to try to make the game work for them. Why wouldn't you? If you're a bunch of dwarves and you're playing basketball, you're going to lower the basket. Otherwise, you can't play basketball, right? And if you want to keep other people from playing with you, you're going to raise the basket so that you can only play with guys that are 8 feet tall. You're going to keep other people out of the game. So the idea is that America is safe if it's number one. So it's game theoretic. It is and can be pathological in various ways. But the world's going to be dominated by some countries, so why wouldn't it be dominated by the United States, right? Of course, other people don't like that, and Bustamante mentioned that a lot of people around the world don't like the United States, and Tom was surprised. He was going, whoa, I had no idea. And Tom didn't know that Taiwan was part of China. Of course, he's ignorant to that whole history. He's not focused on that. He's focused on business, money-making, success. So he's not interested in global world history and so on. Very few people are, really. So they don't understand the context. So it's easy for propaganda to work on your average person because they are ignorant of history and geopolitics and economics and so on. I'm not saying they're bad because they don't know about that stuff. It's just very few people have the time, money, and energy, the resources to learn that stuff. And if if the government of the United States wanted people to be smart, you'd have free education and healthcare. You'd have a culture that was focused on health and on intelligence and had values like that. We want our people to know about statistics and critical thinking and all that kind of stuff. So members of the CIA find their work thrilling. They love it, They love managing and manipulating people, conning people, getting people in, getting the information, the secrets. It's exciting for them. It's like a drug, obviously, or they wouldn't do it. And they target people for obviously very specific reasons. It's not willy-nilly. It's a very professional game. And assets are expendable. When you've extracted everything you can from an asset, you pass them on to junior CIA personnel so that they can take over monitoring that individual, because everyone, this is another key point Bustamante made, everyone has a self-destruct button on their chest. So the idea of the self-destruct button is that we all have in certain cultures, we have a strong need to confess. We do something bad, we tell lie after lie after lie, and on the verge of being caught, we want to confess, and we hope that we'll get better treatment, a lesser sentence, punishment, forgiveness, all that kind of stuff. So imagine how useful that tool of confession is in the Catholic Church. Everybody's a sinner, everybody has a self-destruct button. You come to me and I'll wipe that all clean. It's like a reset. But Bustamante says you can't reset. All you can do is start again. You can't shake the Etch-a-Sketch and wipe it clean. And then, because when you leave confession, even though it's a good tool to control the faithful, and it may be helpful psychologically, when you leave the confessional, you're still the same person. You're still in the same shit, the same game, and you still either lose or win that game, one way or another. So when you find out you lost, you accept the consequences and you move on. You play the game again, a different game or whatever, but you're still the sum total of all that you are. So yeah, in other cultures like Japan, if you feel shame, you're about to get caught, a lot of times the answer is suicide. That's your self-destruction button, because you're not going to be forgiven. That's just not a primary thing over there. You're going to be ostracized or killed, So the CIA obviously doesn't want you to confess and tell the truth, because that will out a whole bunch of CIA people and it'll give them the heads up on what you got on them and so on. So it's very dangerous. So you have to continue to monitor, manipulate, and watch the asset to make sure that they're not going to self-destruct. And of course, a good outcome if they do self-destruct is if they just die. It's, easier that way. But anyhow, so he mentioned that people can't reinvent themselves. You can reinvent yourself if you have the courage and skills, but you can't reset. Like I said before, you can't start the game again like you do with pinball or a computer game. You just, start over and you play. The real life is different. We go from birth to death. It's pretty permanent, pretty temporary, and we are who we are. So that's the thing. Do better next time. And we lie to ourselves a lot, obviously. So, understanding that and being able to deal with that is super important. So he also mentioned that operatives like to find miserable people with secrets beneficial to the United States and con them into, working for them. So, I mentioned the whole thing about the depletion of value and how you get handed off to the next person and so on. That's very important. I like that idea of the self-destruct button because it makes total sense to me. Think about that one. So he talked about motivations for people to spy, and they call that by the acronym RICE, R-I-C-E, and that's reward, ideology, coercion, and ego. And he goes into that a little bit. So these are the things that drive people. And the CIA field operative is going to push those buttons. He's going to find out which ones motivate you more, and he's going to work on that. So he did mention that some people are only motivated with a gun to their head. So some kind of existential threat. And other people can be motivated by money, and other people by compliments and trusting you as a friend, kind of thing. So yeah, they're looking for ways to manipulate you that way. So a CIA guy wants you to think he's a good guy and he's your friend, but he's not. He's just after your secrets and he's pushing your buttons. He also mentioned, which I thought was interesting, that Homeland Security, he didn't say this exactly, but the character Carrie in Homeland Security, in Homeland, the TV show, the TV series, she had various anxiety disorders, and he said that people with these disorders often work really well in the CIA because they're a little paranoid, they're detail-oriented, their anxiety keeps them sharp in the field, keeps them aware. So I thought that was really interesting. It makes a lot of sense to me. And then another thing that I thought was cool was confidence doesn't exist. So he was saying by confidence, what we really mean is competence. And that makes total sense to me. So if you're competent at what you do, you're going to walk in with confidence and do your job, right? But if you think you can't, you're not going to have confidence. So you need to be competent, and from that comes the courage to take risks and to either succeed or fail, and then continue swinging, stay in the game, try again, right? I thought that was really cool. So to have good, to make good decisions, you need good information, skills, etc. You need competence, and then you'll have the guts to go. You're not going to fly a fighter jet if you don't know how. You won't even get to the taxiway. And get back to France, foreign influence is always a big part of the equation. And, other countries don't like us and they're out to get us. And that's just a fact of life. And you have to be ready for that. He mentioned that the BRICS don't like us very much. And they're a big force in the UN, which I've talked about many times. And of course, that's true. There are other countries in the world, other populations besides in the United States. And Tom was going, "Wow, what? Really? Whoa." I thought that was funny. So America's, it's a state, it's a government, it's an idea, it's a meme, it's a fantasy, it's a sum total of all its institutional structures and how those are integrated and how they operate. It's a system, and that's what the CIA is trying to keep safe. If the U.S. does have a civil war and fall apart into a bunch of pieces, all the American people are still going to be there. They're just not going to be a part of the United States of America anymore. They'll be part of something else, because that won't exist. It's good to remember that, right? So if you hate the libs and the reactionary conservatives or neocons or whatever, you pissed off at all the LGBTQ people, they're a part of America. The U.S. is just a state. Who does it actually serve? And people are mad if, the government does something for LGBTQ or for immigrants, that's bad. If they do something for my constituency, that's good. But who is the real constituents of the US government? Is it corporations, or is it, those little subsets of people? So I think there's a lot of theater involved in government, especially in the United States. So, enemies, they're everywhere. And they're really, America's enemies are happy to see Americans at each other's throats. Keep that in mind, when you're pissed off at everyone and not listening to anybody, not learning anymore. America's enemies, if you love the United States of America, they're going to love to see that. And they don't need troll farms to make you do it. You'll figure out ways to hate each other anyway. It's always been like that. Going back to the founding fathers of the United States, the 19th century and all of its challenges, the 20th century and all of its challenges. Look at, Wilson, President Wilson, Teddy Roosevelt, FDR, all the movements and things, civil rights movement, the hippies, yuppies who turned into business owners, who are now rich baby boomers. They own all the wealth. It's we've always been a fractious and feuding culture, more so than other countries in many respects. So it's not the same in China, it's not the same in Japan, it's not the same in South Korea or North Korea, it's not the same in Portugal or other parts of Europe. But Americans love to get at each other. It's just part of the culture. So, Tom was surprised that people don't like Americans. I'm not. I remember traveling in the 80s and American friends would say they were from Canada. I didn't do that. But anyway, I knew they didn't like us. So I always had my Ireland thing to fall back on if I had to. Also, they said Americans unite when they get attacked. Isn't that great? So Tom was really excited about that. That was the best time I can remember in recent history, was when the towers went down and we all united for a brief moment. I think that's a pretty shitty reason to unite. Yeah, when they nuked New York, man, then we all unite. We all love each other for 5 minutes. That's kind of stupid. I wish we could think of a better way. That's all I'm saying. So that's progress for me. I don't think the status quo or the current system is the be-all and end-all. It can get better. It can improve. A little bit of Kaizen. So he predicted, Mr. Bustamante predicted that China will win the Taiwan conflict through legal means, like they did in Hong Kong, and I totally agree with that. There's no way the world's going to go to war with China over Taiwan. It's all just talk, because at the end of the day, China has really good legal reasons to want to keep Taiwan in the fold. It's part of China. It's been recognized for a long time. So if you're living in your house and you lose your deed, but you've been there for generations, there's a good argument that that house belongs to you, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, you don't want to study Chinese history or Taiwanese history. You don't want to know about the Japanese in Taiwan. You don't want to know about indigenous Taiwanese people and their rights and so on, blah, blah, blah. The Kuomintang versus the Maoist revolutionaries. You don't want to know. But you'll get all wound up by CNN and MSNBC and Fox News, going to war with Taiwan. It's not going to happen. Plus, if you think we do business with Taiwan, we do a lot more business. The world does, and the United States does, with China than Taiwan. The thing is the chip foundries. That's a big deal, but that can be overcome with investment and so on. I mean, the technology for those foundries still came out of the United States, and the technology transfer has already gone to China, and China's already figuring all this stuff out. Why do we need to talk about war all the time? It seems kind of stupid to me, but people get excited by it. Gotta have an enemy, gotta have a reason for the the budgets that go into the deep state, all the acronyms, CIA, NSA, Homeland Security, all that stuff. They need their budgets. They need work to do. Jobs, baby. Maybe AI won't replace all the CIA people. You know, you'll still need people to run the AIs. Then he had a prediction about Ukraine, and he said Ukraine's in trouble because they're going to run out of people. And I've thought that from the very beginning. I mean, if Polish soldiers don't come in to replace them, or NATO soldiers or American soldiers or whatever, at some point in a war of attrition, all those high-tech weapons might get destroyed consistently on the battlefield and you can't replace them. And Russia might just keep lobbing all the low-tech stuff at Ukraine for years. And eventually you just run out of people to man the trenches and the guns and so on. Who knows how it's going to work out? I don't know. It's all stupid in my view because it could have been avoided. I really believe that. I think it's time for the world, all the leaders of the world, the players of the game, to start thinking that making peace and maintaining peace is more important than the game theoretic competition of war making and all this stuff. But whatever. I'm a protopian. I'd like to see that, but it probably never will happen. And then circumstances will dictate when all the algae's dead and the krill and all that is dead in the oceans, and the fish can't survive at a certain latitude because of hot water, and the sixth extinction starts to impact things. And climate change, circumstances will dictate. That's the big bad Stalin of the future. So no more soldiers. Ukraine loses, basically, but we'll see. And also he mentioned that big countries, the BRICS and so on, other countries, India, China, Brazil, these are populated countries, you know, big, lots of resources in Russia and in Brazil, tons of resources. In China and India, tons of people, right? So, you know, the Chinese have been in power for decades, and they can play the long game. You know, they've been around, they've been a superpower before and so on. And in the US, there's less continuity. It's a younger country, and it has its own challenges. So I wanted to mention a guy, I will in a sec. But yeah, so the government and economic model in China is different from the United States, but it's still pretty successful if you take an honest look at it. So there's a Beijing-based scholar named Roland Bohr, and he works at the Renmin University, and he's a Marxist scholar and a socialist scholar. Don't run away from that. It's not going to bite you. It's not a monster. It's not satanic. These ideas are well developed in the world. So ignore the propaganda and look into it. Learn about it for yourself. But he wrote this book, Mr. Bohr, called Socialism with Chinese Characteristics, A Guide for Foreigners. And it's a big book, an academic book, but if you read that, you'll understand what China is, and then you can have an opinion on it. Or you can go to globehackers.com, book recommendations. There's a bunch of books about Russia and China there. Read something. Turn off the TV. Go away from all the cool hip blogs and the Rockfin and the Rumble and the YouTube. And just spend a month reading a book and see how you feel. It's empowering. So again, it's interesting. The thing started with humans are hilariously predictable. Indeed, they are. Always remember that. So the CIA loves the law of scarcity. So there's this Kundrasev wave cycle. I'll put the Wikipedia article in the description of this video. So yeah, that's an interesting thing to look at. Anyway, there's these waves of history, and you can kind of predict things. Ray Dalio, with his macroeconomic view of the world, has these kinds of heuristics as well, but this one's interesting. He mentioned that CIA loves economics, and this is key because, you know, our current economic system is based on conflict for control over materials and luxury goods, you know, resources. That's the great game. That's what it is. And players involved with that, whether it's the East India Company or some American corporation now, it's the same. And you have to have this idea of scarcity. You have to compete for control over it so that your guys can have all the power and control. That's the game. And I say it over and over again, but you're not a player. You're not even on the board. You're a resource. Your attention is a resource. Your data is a resource. Your energy, your time, money, and so on is a resource. Your labor is a resource. As long as you're needed as a kind of battery for the great game, you might do well as a shop owner or an insurance salesman or a lawyer or whatever. Once they don't need you anymore, forget it. You have to not restart, but you have to retrain. You have to get new skills, you have new competencies, new abilities to do something else and start swinging again. If you can't do that, you're pretty much fucked. And you have to accept that reality. So you had unpopular strife, the war on terror, and you had Afghanistan, and Iraq, and so on, and now Syria, and all these things. Unpopular, but hopefully China war or conflict or the new Cold War will be popular, and then we can unite around that. And that's what the neoliberals around the world want you to do, is unite against China so they can have control over you, how you think and what you do, how you spend your resources, your time, your money, your energy in the future, and keep the game going. They don't want the game to stop because it's too lucrative for them. The money flows up, it doesn't trickle down. Capital on capital returns, okay? That's how it's done. All the derivatives are about that. They don't improve your life at all. They improve a banker's balance sheet. And we need to understand that. But maybe we don't. I was toying with the idea that a stoic apathy would be better anyway. Go to the beach, drink margaritas, leave Las Vegas, have a good time, never mind. Own the libs, do whatever the fuck you want, because you have no power anyway. So whatever. But we tend to have this delusion that we have power. It's delusion, man. It's not real. We don't have power. You have power, limited power in various circumstances. If you're the coach of a basketball team or something, or you're the CEO of your company or whatever. But it's limited, and it's limited to a certain context, and you still have to play the game within the structures and within the system. Within the system's structures. You can't get out of that. You don't code capital. You don't make the law. So there's, Hayek talks about judicial law, law based on judges and precedent versus law that's just created by lawmakers in service of corporations and so on. He's got interesting ideas about that. I'm not a Hayek guy, but he's brilliant. You should read Hayek if you want to understand economics. It's just one of those things. You often have to read people you don't think you're in agreement with to know anything about a subject. So anyway, So that's the reason why the propaganda is there. So we're all pretty much screwed because it's going to make us feel that the game is popular, and we're going to go with that because people are wired to fit in. And then this new conflict's going to be popular, and it's going to make America great again. Or maybe not. We go back to mercantilism. We go back to America firstism, and so on. Whatever. I don't care. But anyway, that's what you want to look at. So, yeah, after World War II, we took charge and we were the bosses, the hegemon for quite a while. But things are shifting. Make no mistake about that. You can know about it or not. It doesn't matter. So, again, he mentioned Alexander Hamilton, which is interesting, about the desire during the Civil War was basically to keep America intact, the United States of America as a thing, from coast to coast. Think of that. All the resources from the Atlantic to the Pacific in that continent under your control. And of course, the Philippines, Central America, and Cuba, and the Bahamas, and the Caribbean, and South America, Canada, all the things connected to it. Hegemony, power. So there's a website I'll put in the description. It's alexanderhamiltonsociety.org. Very interesting group. So then he talked about the top 5 powers being democracies. 2 are democracies, the rest are monarchies. That's not true because it depends on how you define what a top power is. So generally, the top powers are United States, China, Russia, Japan, Germany, places like that. Big economies, lots of influence, lots of people, lots of natural resources to exploit. You could look at the African continent, but in general, the Congo, yeah, it has some things that the game players, the gamers need, but it's not really a powerful country. So then what kind of a government does the United States have? It's a constitutional, federal, presidential, constitutional republic. And we have our checks and balances, our 3 branches of government, legislative, executive, and judicial. All of these things are problematic now and losing trust with various groups in the United States. Look at Clarence Thomas. Look at Congress people like Marjorie Taylor Greene or AOC or whatever, So China's a one-party socialist republic, and it's governed by the Communist Party, the CCP. But that's a complicated thing, and it's more participatory and technocratic in the sense that they elect people with expertise in their jobs, the jobs that they're supposed to be carrying out, and they evaluate whether or not they did their job before they elect them again. The Communist Party, it's a big thing, it's a big party. And it's a complex system of government. It has, a president, a premier, National People's Congress, state councils, all kinds of other bodies. And you can read about that in those books that I recommend at globehackers.com. So Russia is a federal semi-presidential thing, republic. But they, like Portugal, they have president, prime minister, bicameral parliament. And, we criticize it because of the lack of pluralism and whatever, and restrictions of civil liberties. But you may not think your civil liberties are restricted in the States, but they are, but in a much subtler way. Whereas in Russia, it's in your face. We don't like that because we think we're free, freedom and democracy. But how free are we really when we're just being programmed by the bullshit? Your critical thinking skills, your bullshit detector kit. And Japan is different. Now, Japan is a monarchy, a constitutional monarchy. So you can look at that as and it's a complicated thing too. You have prime minister and you have bicameral legislature, I guess, the National Diet, and the House of Representatives, and the House of Councilors. I don't remember all of it, but it's a thing. I lived in Japan for 10 years. And Germany's a parliamentary thing, democratic republic, blah, blah, blah. I don't get into all that, but a monarchy is, you have a single person, like Yarvin, in his mind, I guess it's kind of like a CEO. But, and the law comes down from God, the Bible, the king, it's dictated, it's given. It doesn't come out of precedence in the circumstances of maintaining, giving justice. It's a different thing. So the monarch could have power or not. It could be just ceremonial, like King Charles right now, as opposed to some people think that Queen Elizabeth I had a lot of power and influence. And yeah, but it's complex. So the countries in the world that are, kingdoms or monarchies, you got Saudi Arabia, you got Oman, you got Qatar, you got Morocco, you got Bahrain. Now these are powerful countries. Why? Because they have resources that we want, and that's fossil fuel. So that's why Russia is powerful, relatively speaking, oil and gas. And the same thing that we're fighting over in Ukraine that we fought over in Iraq, arguably. Or you can just pretend that's not a factor. It's just human rights and democracy, that's it. Before the war started, Ukraine was a pristine democracy without corruption and, all that kind of stuff. Of course, that's not true at all, but whatever. You want to believe that, that's fine. It's simple. It comes right off of MSNBC. You know it's true. But in reality, the game is about control of these resources that keep a country powerful. And in the case of Oman and Morocco and Saudi Arabia, it keeps the king and his people in power. And they're filthy rich, just like Putin. He's probably a trillionaire, who knows? But some people have said that. Call him what you will. Putler, Satan, dictator, oligarch, whatever. We all know that the media is in it for the money, right? We got millionaires working for billionaires, and they're talented people who sit in front of a camera and read a script. And you have investigative journalists like Matt Taibbi, love him or hate him, and other people who actually do a lot of hard work to gather data and witnesses and sources, analyze this stuff, talk to other analysts, organize the information, and present it without much ideological commentary. So we can make our judgments based on that information. And you can look at the resources, their sources, their hyperlinks, all that kind of stuff. Tons of information out there, but we don't want to look at it because we don't want to put our energy, our time, and our money into it. We'd rather just sit passively and watch CNN. And then we know it's true. A general got on there. And we don't realize that the general and these other experts are being paid by big lobbies and corporations and other groups to have an opinion. And then a heterodox guy goes on YouTube and we think he's bullshit. It's hard to triangulate towards truth and an accurate understanding of how things work and what's going on. So, they have this idea, I guess, that a popular war, or if the United States becomes number 2 instead of number 1 for a while, kind of gets humbled, it'll become popular again. People will be tagging, subway cars and doing graffiti and changing their name from Betty to Bob, and, just catching all the cultural contagion, building Disneylands everywhere. And we'll all want to be Americans. Americans want to be popular. Rap music. Forget about your traditional music and culture. Rap music. The marketing is powerful and we can't resist it. America will be popular again. The American dream. People want to go to America and get rich. But circumstances will soon trash all of that, trust me. So the military-industrial complex has a big drag on the United States. Spending way too much money there. And there's examples throughout history when people get out over their skis militarily. So as far as another funny thing he said was that CIA people often say, "Fuck France," because they don't like the French intelligence agency because they get over on the States, like I said before. And that's called the DGSE, and I don't know what it stands for, but there's a website that explains it all in English. I put that in the description so you can check it out if you want to. So, they also speculated that maybe in our grandchildren's time, the USA might get split up or fall or something. Well, I'm thinking the next 10 years are crucial because of the climate change thing, but a lot of people tell me that that's not a thing. It's just a conspiracy by George Soros and the deep state and whatever to make us obey and eat crickets. Well, we'll see. So, the last point I want to make is that he was kind of saying that human beings are wired to survive, but thriving and success and all that requires a lot more work, time, energy, and money, investment. To thrive and survive, you have to work a lot harder to get there. But we are all definitely hardwired to survive, and most of us on the planet, probably the vast majority, are just surviving. And we can do better, I think. We can do better than just survive. We can do better than the systems and structures that we have today. But we don't have much power, and the people who play the game want to keep the game going. So don't expect neoliberalism and capitalism and all these isms to disappear anytime soon. They're not. Circumstances will sort that out. Thank you for listening. Take good care. Please like and subscribe. Tell your friends if you found this interesting. And I'll talk to you again soon. Bouillon tea.